Howdy folks, Jesse with Hummingbird Guitars here. Let's make a video, sorry about my voice. Let's do a no frills cigar box guitar. 3-stringer. Got all the parts here that you need. Piece of 1.5 inches by 3/4 stock for the neck. Piece of 1.5 inches by 1/4 inch for a fretboard. And I've already cut this down. I decided to go 25.5 inch scale length. So I've got my template to mark the fret slots. Strings, tuners, frets, bone nut, some strap buttons. On this build I'm just going to use a piezo, and this is a pre-wired. It's got a jack and a volume jack plate. And we're going to do ferrules for the strings, run through the neck. We got a heel, and I just chose this. This is just a couple pieces of, it's 3 pieces of glued up 1/2 inch plywood, so it's 1.5 inches wide. We're going to use a shim, a wood shim, which is about just right for the back angle. I just have this piece of rosewood. It's from an adjustable bridge for an arch top, but we're going to turn it into a bridge. And we're going to put a fret on top of it. So I'll get started. First of all, I'm going to glue up the fretboard to the neck, and I'll make some shots here and there, show you what I'm doing, but I'm not going to go through the entire process. It's going to be a long video if I do that. So we're going to try to keep this edited at about 20 minutes, but we're going to make this entire cigar box guitar probably within 4 hours. Okay, round 2, I've got some things marked out on the neck. I forgot to mention that we have to do some cutting before you can glue the fretboard on. So I've got the fretboard, the slots marked out, and the fret markers marked out. Doing a 0 fret here. On the neck, I've located where I want the tuners, and I've made a mark to take this section out so the thickness of the headstock is enough to receive the tuners, and that's usually around 5/8 of an inch. So I've made a mark a little past, here's the end of my fretboard, and I'll have a 1/4 inch nut on there. So I wanted to go a little bit further, and that's where I'll cut that section out. So what I'll do first is I'll drill the holes, and then I'll cut this out. So here I've got marked out my string ferrules, which actually will only be on the bottom side. So I will use a pilot drill bit and go all the way through on the top. That's enough to stick a string through. And on the other side, I believe those are 1/4 inch. So then I will countersink the 1/4 inch to receive those inserts. Now this section here, that is the cutout for the lid of the box. Okay. I have a mark down here, and that's where my heel will be glued onto to stiffen things up. And I've went ahead and located the center of the box on both ends, and on the neck side we're pretty much taking this whole chunk out to receive the neck and the heel. But on the back side, it's only the thickness of the neck that's coming through the box. So I will start cutting this out, and I think this time then I'll be ready to glue the fretboard on, as well as the heel. And I'll cut the box to receive the neck, and I'll be right back. I know I keep saying I'm going to be gluing this stuff up, but I just wanted to mention one more thing. If you want to do a dry fit, make sure everything is where it needs to be, because of course, see, we got a bigger cutout in the front than we do the back. So before you glue everything up, just take some tape everything up. I've got everything cut. I haven't sanded anything flat yet. I cut this stuff on a bandsaw, so it's kind of wavy, but it's pretty close. Got my ferrules ready to go. So we can test this. Okay. See, and for the sake of this video, I'll probably leave it, but I've mismeasured a little bit. Got a couple gaps. It'll still work, but you know, you could go that way and make this one tight and have a bigger gap there and maybe fill it in, push it all the way back, make them somewhat even. I just mismeasured a little bit. I should have measured the lid itself, not the box in its entirety, but I don't really care. So now, you know, sometimes you have to do some filing, but it looks like it's in there snug. It's not moving around. And we've got us, you know, I went just enough, small gap there. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this shim, okay, it's a wooden shim. Go the length of the box there. Pencil. that. And if you wanted, you could go clear out to the heel. It doesn't matter. So now, with the thin side towards the neck, so it's a wedge, that means the neck will be lower than where the bridge will be. I'll give it just enough of a slight break angle. And it looks like I just need to sand this a little bit, cutting on the bandsaw. It's just a touch. But what that will do is now the fretboard won't be parallel with the top of the box. It's leaning back a little bit depending on the bridge you're using. This one is what I'll be using. Maybe something else we'll just see. And if you wanted to, once this is down, you can take a straight edge. Actually, I will sand this real quick so it lays flat, so the lid lays flat, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now we've got the lid so it lays flat, and it's very important that at least where the bridge is going to be, that it's tight against the neck portion. That way the string tension doesn't draw that bridge down and cave in the lid. But what I did do is you can kind of see just a little carve out right there. Okay. And that's about kind of in the center of the box or so. And that's for when the strings vibrate, and it transfers that vibration. And so now what we've got here, got everything cut out. Everything looks good. Got our back angle. So let's, if you can see what I'm doing here, I'm just putting a little something underneath the neck to keep it flat where it needs to be. That way it won't move on me. So let's just say we're using this bridge. Who knows? That's why we're going to test this out here. And you won't know the size of the nut just yet, but with the 0 fret, you can count on it being, let's just say this piece of side dot material. So now you can take your straight edge, make sure you're about 25 and a half, and that's right on there, and that looks perfect. So I'm looking underneath my straight edge. You know, it's all arbitrary right now until I get the frets on. If I need to adjust the bridge, I can. But it looks to me that I've got a great back angle and just enough room for my frets and as low as action as I can. Everything looks really good. So now is the time that I will glue the fretboard on, glue the heel on, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how I cut the fret slots. So while glue is drying, there's always other things to be prepped. You know, you can always work on some other stuff. So what we're gonna do now is just a little internal bracing. We're not gonna go too far. I just grab some pieces that I found, cut them. So what we're doing here is, you know, if you decide to put your strap buttons in the corners, sometimes you put it here too. But either way, this gives it a little bit of meat, and then the screw will marry everything together. So no big deal. We can just throw some hot glue on there. Just to keep it in place. And if you want, you could kind of just weld the corners a little bit like that. And then what we'll want to do is I just found another piece of wood here. Glue it to the front like this, so that when we close the lid, we have something to screw to the lid to. So again, we'll just do a bead of hot glue like this. Make sure it's flush or a little bit lower than where the box lid sits. And now you have something you can screw your lid down to. And this is very minute internal bracing compared to what I normally do. This is just for the sake of showing you how easy it is to build a cigar box guitar. But these really will strengthen up the box. You know, like this box is an MDF kind of material. So when I cut this front out, I actually saved a little bit of paper, right? That way you can hide your cut. So if you flip that over like this, it adds a nice finish to it. So we're going to throw a little bit of super glue in there. Okay. And actually, I mean, it'll take a little bit, but we can also put a super glue our wedge here. Just enough here. And I always say there's a super glue for everything. You know, you got liquid, you got gel, you got like that Gorilla stuff is expanding. There's a glue for everything. You know, just to hold this down, I'm just gonna tack it in the back, just a little bit here, not to get any on the top. We'll hold that, and then just use a little clamp on the front here. There. Okay. Now we might as well do a little bit in these corners. A little bit. And I've decided I didn't like that bridge I was using, so actually here I got a couple pieces of walnut. One piece already has a slot in it. It's a cutoff from a previous fretboard, and then to get to the right height I just added another. So this is about a ½ inch tall, and then when you add the fret, I'm going to put a fret on top, and it'll be just the right height. So I'm just letting this, I glued this together, just letting that sit. So what we can do, let me grab my drill. We can drill the hole for the volume pot. This is a right-handed guitar. You just want to make sure you miss your bracing a little bit. I don't really care where it's at, so we're going to go about right here. And I'm using 5/16. Okay. And we can also drill for the jack, which I'm using a plate, a square jack plate. So the hole can be, I use a 7/8 of an inch. That's just enough for the jack to slide through and the plate to cover the hole. that's done. Clean up all the hot glue mess. And we're just waiting for our glue to dry. You know, you're gonna wait a little bit longer normally, but in this case, it's gonna be, I'll let it sit for probably, I don't know, 30 to 45 minutes, and I'll take the clamps off. But I want to tell you how important it is when you're gluing a fretboard onto a neck to use some sort of straight caul. Typically, I've got a couple of these steel rectangular tubing. They're 1 inch by 1.5 inches. And I'll clamp that. You don't need all sorts of clamps. And this will help keep your neck straight, because it can tend to bow if you don't have the same amount of pressure throughout the fretboard. In this case, I'm just using the tabletop because I know my table is true and flat. And I got the heel glued on, clamped up too. So we'll wait for that to dry, and we'll go on to the next step. Fun, right? All right, we're back. Had enough time to go to the Dollar General, drink another cup of coffee, and petted some kitties. So before we take the neck off the clamps here, we're just gonna just drill a couple holes in the box. By the way, I'm pretty proud of this piece of plywood. I keep it on my drill press, and this is 10 years old. I've used this piece of plywood ever since I started building. So I just kind of wanted to show that off. So what we're going to do here is, once we're ready to set the neck in the box, you know, we'll close the lid. Screws will go in here, but I also like to put a screw through the back of the heel and underneath the heel. So a couple simple little holes we'll drill. Doesn't matter where, probably 1.5 inches back. 1, 2, and 1 down over here. 3. So once this is all set in place, it'll be one solid unit. All right. So the next step, on the neck, cool, right? Simple design here. So what we've got to do is we've got to cut the fret slots. We've got to sand the headstock flat, and we've got to drill the front marker holes. Okay, so while we're over here, let's just go ahead and drill these holes. Depth isn't really a big thing here. Alright, honestly, let's just go ahead and do these before we cut the slots. So, chisel is your friend. I just usually take my chisel, cut these little rods. So it looks like we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I go, 3/8 of an inch or so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Super glue, Q-tips. Just a dab in there. Pound her in with the butt of your chisel. And I'm not at all saying that my way is right or wrong. Again, this is just a quick demonstration. And honestly, I do all my guitars quite different all the time. But these are the basics here. Real simple, easy to build cigar box guitar. And I am not going to put side dots on this, just because we're keeping it simple. So if you're like me and in the winter time, mainly my thumbs, but fingers start cracking, just rub that super glue, that extra super glue into your fingers. Alright, just kind of clean the excess super glue, just like that, they're all set already. Okay. While we have the neck sitting here, we're going to grab our nut. Mark it for the width. And since this is got a 0 fret, the height of your nut can be pretty much the same height as your fretboard. So we'll shape that here after a while. Our next step is to flush up these markers. And what I'll use, this is a very good tool to have, just a flush cut, super thin flush cut saw. Couple strokes. Okay, now for the fun part, you go for a ride over to the other side of the shop. We're going to go here to the scroll saw, and I've got my blade in backwards. So, especially on a straight neck, like I do 3 stringers, line your marks up and pull towards you, and it makes slotting super easy. I'm going the depth of the blade, and that's about perfect for your frets. And you want these slots to be nice and even all the way down the fretboard. What I'm doing is I'm stopping the cut once the back side of the blade is flush with the top of the fretboard. quick and effective. Here we go again. Ooh. All right, what is next? So usually, you know, if I'm using abalone dots or acrylic rod or any sort of harder material, what I'll do, see over here I've got a piece of belt sanding belt, and I'll just sand that flat. Okay, that makes sure that your fretboard is completely flat, and you want to go until there's no more pencil marks left. Okay, and sometimes you want to rotate it just in case you've got more pressure on one side of your hand compared to the other. But you want to be pretty much in the middle of the neck, so you got even pressure, even down pressure. A little bit more to go here. It's kind of hard to hold this, so I'm going to put you back over here. You can tell I wasn't quite flat because I've got no pencil marks there, no pencil marks here, and there's still some pencil marks there. So we're working these down. You know, this was actually a boughten 1/4-inch piece of oak. I didn't do any planing, you know, I didn't do any machining here in the shop, and you can tell it wasn't quite perfect. That's what you run into buying at a big box store, but it is what it is. Okay, now what I'll do, so I'll finish it with my block sander. Full strokes. Nice and smooth. Just to check it, that's looking really good. We'll run it a little bit more. Okay. Sorry about my voice. It's going on 2 weeks of this crap. I was sick for 2 weeks. And now I feel decent. But my voice isn't coming back. So what do we got going on here? So next up, I know not everybody has these power tools and you know, stuff like that. So everybody's got to do stuff differently. You know, if you don't have a scroll saw to do the frets, just use a coping saw or a pull saw. There's always other ways to do things. I'm just fortunate enough to have acquired all these tools over the last 10 years. And it makes my job easier. So next up is making the profile for the back of the neck. Okay. And what I normally do is just use a, oh, I don't know what this is, probably a 5/8 inch round over bit. I usually use like a 3/8 on 3 stringers and a 5/8 on a 4 stringer, but this was in. I don't feel like changing it out. So what we need to do is we need to find where the box is on the heel. Okay, so there's the box. Now we're going to want to go just about 3/8 away. Just make it square line across there. And that's where I want to stop my profile. And honestly, I also want to stop it, you know, just past the fretboard here, anywhere. I don't want to go into the headstock. I'll just ease those edges over with a sander. So somewhere, you know, right there. When I always wear long sleeves, always goes up in my sleeve. Anyways, yeah, now you have a nice rounded profile for the back. And the next step is sanding. So it's not going to take much. I'll just do it all with the orbital sander. And I'm not going to make you watch. You know, it'll literally take me about 5 minutes. And I'll be back and we'll go on to the next step, which I believe is finishing. And there's all types of different finish work. If you want to use polyurethane or true oil or tung oil, this particular build today, we are just going to use paste wax. So I'll be right back and we'll do that. All right, so we're all sanded up, nice and smooth. And I've decided, since we're doing a paste wax finish on this, we're going to go ahead and install the frets right now, and then we'll apply the paste wax finish after it's all done. Typically, personally, I oil all my necks first, get them finished, and then I do my fret work. I'd say 99% of the time. But this time, we're going to go ahead and do the fret work, and then apply the finish. And I went ahead and actually I shaped my nut already. So after the frets go on, before the finish, this can be glued on. Now you can see kind of out of space here. So my slots are lower than the fretboard. The nut itself is actually a little bit higher, but with the 0 fret, your nut just becomes the string retainer to keep all the strings in line. So if you can see that. And I'm a big believer in rounding over the top corners of the nut rather than keeping them sharp. I also took just a few minutes to make my bridge. Now we'll also get paste wax. Since we're using piezo, we don't need to do any ground wire or anything like that. That's only with the magnetic pickup. So this will be a floating bridge, no ground wire. You can set your intonation by twisting it one way or another. So to the frets, maybe I won't make you watch me do all of them, but you got your hammer, nippers, edge file, a triangular file, and I use a piece of 320 grit sandpaper. We're not going to do any polishing or anything like that. It's going to be very quick, simple fret job here. It's always kind of a challenge when you have a heel, you know. So what I'll do as much as I can here on my block with a towel, Then I'll flip it around and put it on the edge of just the workbench to do the last however many, 4 of them or whatever. And I gotta say, this video turned out way longer than I thought. I thought it was gonna be, you know, a 20-minute video. It looks like we're probably on the verge of an hour. So shout out to you. Kudos if you watched this entire thing. Maybe you learned something, maybe not. Any comments or concerns, questions, go ahead and shoot them to me. Now these are curved frets and they're pre-cut for a 6-stringer, but it doesn't matter. We got a straight neck. You can use any of them anywhere. And I just go ahead and I install all of them and then nip them off. But what I like to do is when you get it in the slot here, is get one side set. Okay? Get one side set. Then work it over to the other side. Look every once in a while, make sure they're flat, properly seated, and those tangs, you know, I used to super glue all these in, but if your slots are the right width, those tangs will grab on as the frets straighten out and they won't come loose. Tell you what, I know Jessica's up there cooking up a storm in the kitchen. Even in my shop, I can smell she's cooking something good. One other thing, you know, some people swear to use a base fret or a jumbo fret for the 0. Myth busted. Use all the same frets all the way along. So I'm not going to make you watch me do the rest of this. I'll put the rest of them in, I'll nip them off, come back and show you the next step. And we're back. We got all the frets installed, ends nipped off. I've checked with my string action ruler. I use this as a fret rocker as well. There's probably, let's see, I think there's 2 that are a little high, but for this build, I'm not going to worry about it. If you'd like to know how to level frets, we could do that some other time. I think these will be just fine. One tool I forgot is this file I use. And, you know, with those flush cut snippers, they're still not quite completely flush. So it doesn't take much. I just lay it on the side. And you can kind of tell when you're running along which ones are still high, and if you're flat, you can kind of hear the sound and feel. So typically, like I said, I've already usually got my finish on. So when I do this, I make sure that my file is only on the fretboard, just in case. So we're pretty much right there. They're all flush. Feels real nice. Flip it over, do the same to the other side. Okie dokie. So now we'll take this fret end file that leaves a bevel. Okay. So you're going to push in against the fretboard and down. Long, even strokes. I think we're looking pretty good there. You're probably going to be in about 1 millimeter maybe. Flip it over to the other side. And something I tell myself, I like to think I do, is when I'm doing this, I can kind of tell if there's a high fret just by the way the wood falls along. More down here. Okay. So, I mean, really, that's pretty dang smooth. So what I do next, this is just a regular triangle file. It'd actually be better if one side, see the file, the knives wrap around. I'd rather have one that it's flat on one side. But what you're gonna do is just take off the points of the frets. Just maybe 2 or 3 strokes just to round that off a little bit. Now, I've done this so many times. You kind of get in the groove of it, but if you're not careful, you will dig into the wood. So now I'll take my 320 sandpaper, run that all along those. Kind of put your finger so that the sandpaper gets in between the frets as well. It may not feel like you're getting there, but you will. Just follow that bevel. Make sure you're moving your sandpaper so you're using new sand. Okay, so then follow the bevel. Now do the edge of the fretboard flat. Okay, turn it a little bit and just knock off that bevel slightly. There, you got a pretty smooth fret. Now we'll just do the same to the other side. And I'll come back to this. And we're back. Frets are all smooth. Glued the nut on. Now we're ready for some paste wax. Paste wax is a pretty good finish. And I prefer this SC Johnson over Minwax or anything else. This kind of warms up and turns almost, kind of liquefies a little bit and penetrates the wood a little bit better, I think. But it is a temporary finish. Over time, as dust settles on the instrument and such, you may have to do some light sanding and touch it up again. But it is pretty decent. I mean, ends up smooth. It only takes, 15 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and cut this rag in half. Don't be afraid. Use a liberal amount. This isn't the best rag. It's mesh. But it'll work. You can already see the nice grains in the oak and the maple come out. Don't worry about getting sloppy, because after it kind of hardens like wax does, we'll come back through with a paper towel and get rid of all the excess. You don't have to do the parts that are inside the box, but let's just go ahead and do them anyway. You might not be able to see, but I can tell it's really penetrating the wood. And like all the holes and stuff will come back through with a Q-tip. Get rid of that stuff. And you can also use steel wool if you want. Super fine steel wool so you don't scratch your nice smooth surface. And you can kind of tell already that it's getting a little milky, liquefied a little bit. Just keep rubbing it in, and this protects pretty good. It's not a hard finish. I think the last one I did with toothpicks, I used paste wax. Okay, that's pretty good. And what I'll do now is kind of use my fingers on the fretboard so you really get in there. Kind of make this kind of milky concoction here. I've had this can of paste wax for a couple years, I'd say. All right, now we can't forget to do our bridge here. That walnut really comes alive. And actually my work table, every once in a while I'll sand it down if there's glue or chips in my plywood. I'll sand it and finish it with paste wax. Makes a nice surface to work on. Okay. Again, I'm sorry if this video is ending up pretty long, but I hope everybody's enjoying it. If you made it this far, let me know what you think. So we will let this sit probably 15 minutes or 20 minutes. We'll come back with paper towels. And wipe the excess off. And I want to give you a tip. Be careful with this stuff because it is what's the word? Combustible. So rather than throwing this in your trash, just throw it on the ground where it's safe. Because I've actually thrown it in the trash, my rag in the trash before, and it started on fire. So you got to be really careful. I got really lucky that time. So we'll let this sit. In the meantime, we'll go over and we'll do our electronics in the box.